So we have a quick message from CrazyLab, our track sponsors, coming up now.
This is an idea for a game. But which game? Who knows? It can be anything. Game ideas want to become something famous that will make people laugh and shout things like, "Yes, I did it!" So do it. Become that special game already. Oh, it's not that easy, is it? Don't worry, we can help. You see, we love game ideas, and we know that behind every idea, there is a proud developer parent. Can you believe it? We're actually talking with the developer, understanding, caring, giving support if needed, and then it happens. Amazing! This is our job as publishers. We are CrazyLabs.
There we go. So talking of CrazyLabs, we're going to have them up first as our first speaker. But before I do that, I need to remind you of a couple of things. In particular, you may notice that we now have closed captions. So you can see that option on the bottom right of your Zoom window. And you can toggle closed captions on and off. You can also opt for live transcription, which pulls up the script to the side of your window as well, which I find incredibly useful. We'll be tweeting all day, and you can use PG Connects to share your thoughts. So the hash PG Connects on your conference. And obviously, don't forget to drop any questions you've got into the Q&A section down below. So I think hopefully we're all ready to get going, and we can introduce our first speaker, who is going to be from CrazyLabs. So we have, he says, my notes seem to have lost the name. Oh my goodness, Moria, I knew it was you, but for some reason my notes have lost your name on it. So I'm having a fun start to the day. All these technical glitches will be resolved. Moria, how are you doing? Hopefully you, I can see you're there, but I can't currently. Ah, there we are. Nice to see you again. How are you? Oh, you're on mute.
Ah. Hi, what's up, Oscar? We're so happy to see that it's you. But let me change my background for a sec.
I'm clearly not good at Monday mornings because all of my technology, my mute's not working, my screen's not working.
It kicked me off Zoom before I get in. So
and it's all my own fault because I was just pulling up your LinkedIn page, and I think I must have cut it rather than. So it's no one on the team's fault. It's completely my incompetence this morning. But anyway, lovely to see you. And you're going to talk to us about key elements for a meaningful hyper-casual game. Does that sound all right?
Meaningful reviews. Yeah.
Oh, meaningful reviews. Meaningful reviews. Yeah. Even better. So I will hand over to you and come back with lots of questions, I'm sure.
Just a second, please.
Oh, okay, no worries.
Just a sec.
That's all good.
Yeah, I have.
So one of the things I find really fascinating about Hypercasual myself is that I think I've learned loads of lessons about the function of publishing. So as we've become publishers of living games, you'd think that would be the antithesis of Hypercasual, but actually a lot of the practical techniques that you guys are talking about and espousing, we're trying to instill in people doing longer term retention based content because it's so good at creating efficiency. But anyway, let's talk about Hypercasual.
I'm ready.
Great stuff. I will go hide myself and listen intently to every word you say.
See you a little bit later.
See you in a bit.
All right.
That's all looking good.
Okay, so you basically can see my screen, and I will start.
Not full screen, just so you know.
Sorry?
No, you're right. You're good now.
All right, cool. So, who among you know what is the biggest difficulty of swimmers in open sea? The most intuitive thing will be to think about the cold, the waves, or even getting out of bed in the morning. But what swimmers in open water count as their biggest difficulty is actually the float, mostly known as buoy. And why is that? In a podcast that I heard a few weeks ago, the professor talked about a lecture that Steve Jobs himself gave in front of executives, and that this difficulty happens because in open water swimming, You swim and swim, invest an enormous effort, but sometimes when you raise your head, you realize the buoy is on the other side and you are not swimming in the right direction. That's why professional swimmers, every few moves, raise their head and look at the buoy. And why am I telling you all of that? Because the same goes for many cases in our life. We work hard, we invest an enormous effort, but forget to raise our head, look at the buoy and see if we're in the right direction. I wanted to share this story with you because we can take it to the world of game development. We can set up a studio, hire people, find the right publisher to work with, but sometimes it still feels like we have lost our direction. Today, I want to try to help you learn how to swim in the right direction, look at your buoy and keep focus. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here again. My name is Moria, and I'm VP Creative and Product Design at CrazyLabs. My team and I are responsible for the creative leadership, ideation, professional guidance of all the teams of our Hypercasual lab, from concept to live ops. CrazyLabs is a mobile game developer and publisher with hyper-casual hits that have brought us over 4.8 billion downloads so far. Among our games, you can find Tie-Dye, Funky's DIY, Sculpt People, Zoom Out 3D, and more. Review is part of our life, and criticism is something we receive on a daily basis. Sometimes it suits us well, and sometimes it doesn't. One thing for sure, we can learn something from any feedback we receive. As a game developer, you get a lot of feedback. You get a lot of no's. Sometimes yes, and most of the time, the feedback means that you just need to keep on working. The feedback can change everything for your game, and that game can turn you into millionaires. Yes, it can happen to any of you. The most important thing we can do is to learn from our mistake and constantly become a better version of our product and ourselves. I want to share with you my ways to give and receive feedback well. A significant part of what my team and I do is provide feedback to our developers from pitch through initial testing to final game versions. Why learn how to receive and give feedback? Because in hyper-casual, you don't have room or time for mistake. While you are working on your stunning game, there is at least one game developer somewhere in the world working on the exact same game, and you want your game to be out first. In order to stay focused and give developer constructive feedback that can help them move full speed ahead, we use specific methods when it comes to early stages. It's part of the mentoring we provide to studios that work with us and can become part of your development culture. We have defined 4 categories to evaluate the potential of the game. And we give score from, we use a scorecard and use a score from 1 to 5, just like the App Store rating. When we give a low score, we will always explain what wasn't good and advice or suggestion for improvement. The first and perhaps the most important section in hyper-casual is gameplay clarity, followed by production value, innovation, and engagement. I will elaborate on each and will give you some examples. When talking about gameplay clarity, we are basically going back again to the definition of hyper-casual games and the 3 seconds rule. A hyper-casual game must be self-explanatory. Our players must understand how to play the game, sometimes even before opening it. The ad should clearly show us what the game is about. Your pitch should include one-liner that explains your game. 1 sentence, that's it. This is the core of hyper-casual games. So here you can see a good example of how a game can be described in only 1 sentence versus the long and tedious one. Regarding production value, here you have to adjust your pitches to the capabilities of your team. If a studio is not strong in 3D character animation, for example, and they submitted a pitch that is all about facial expression and character communication, we will recommend them not to go into this adventure. Another example is when sometimes a video you send just look like an early prototype. So we will either decide that it's not worthwhile working on, or explain what wasn't good, you know, like amateur UI or using non-hyper-casual colors, for example. And we will see how it can be improved. The quality of games in the market is always on the rise, so we can't afford ourselves, you know, to put out tests that are not outstanding. In terms of innovation, one thing you need to know, we don't allow clones of games, and we don't recommend working on games or themes unless you are the early adopter of the trend, long before it was chewed to death. And I'm not saying that every game you submit must reveal a new mechanic to the world. We all know the market and we understand the evolution that themes and mechanics go through. But when a developer comes with a familiar theme in their pitch, like the Squid Game craze, you know, and Milk Crate Challenge, we always want them to bring a twist to it. When talking about engagement, we want to see if our idea can really become a game. Sometimes when pitching an idea, you realize that there's simply not a game there. In addition, we must understand what's the wow moment. If it doesn't exist, there may not be a reason to come back and play. In that case, we'll recommend possible direction or send a developer back to do some rethinking. A wow moment is so important to the player's sense of satisfaction, progress, and connection to the game. It may be a short or quick moment, but it's extremely important. You won't be able to test your game without it. Now, let's move on and start working on your actual game, which means you get to receive different angles of reviews and feedback. How many times you were sure you were doing exactly what your publisher asked you to do, and how many times you finally sent out a version and got the same review again. There are ways to avoid that and save time, whether you're getting the review or receiving it. The most important thing is actually the definition of the task. Which part I want to take on exactly? Is it the control? Is it the drop in the level funnel? Or maybe it's the usage? Now let's talk about the essence of the review and where to focus. It's the business question, priority, the length of the review, and communication. I want to dive into the first part that sometimes we get lost in, the business question. It is important because it can become your anchor and can help you find your buoy if you ever get lost again. When we need to improve a specific KPI, we must stay focused and try to solve that exact problem. Does this version that we're planning now really answer the business question? Will it really move the needle? If a version has a drop between two levels, that's the most important thing to tackle. It doesn't matter if the catalog UI doesn't flash the way you wanted it to be, because that won't fix the drop. Sure, write it down, add it to your backlog, but don't forget to raise your head, check where your buoy is, and it's not the catalog UI at that point. Prioritizing tasks make it much easier to contain within versions. But how much content can a version hold? Once you know your business questions and they are translated into action items, narrow it down to 3 things that need more work. Make sure that the next iteration deals with exactly those. I think that part of the reason why hypercasual is so popular is this. People stopped reading. When you're giving a feedback, keep it short. Even better, stick to visuals. If you have a reference that you want and say what you meant, send it with a link or with a visual. You have so many ways to do it without word. Record a video, use arrows or screenshot, make circles on the problematic area, find similar games where your comments are replied well. For example, here, you can see UI bottles that need further work. And the reference is the UI of the bottles that dragged the way we did it in tie-dye. So we sent a screenshot and recorded a short video that points to the exact thing we wanted to describe. Communication. When I give or receive feedback, I try to use the effective communication model, also known as the 73855 communication model. It means that the message is divided into 3 parts: 7% content, 55% visual, and 38% auditorial. Simply put, it means that the content has a very small part, while the way the message is given, presented, and displayed has more significant effect. Now, don't just hand out tasks as you are giving orders. Add your visual and reference and turn it into conversation. See what the other side thinks and make sure they know exactly what you want and what is expected from them. Mirroring is a wonderful technique for it. You'll be surprised to learn how many times the other person misunderstood something that seems so clear to you. By mirroring, I mean actually to ask the other person to explain what he or she understood out of what I said. Let them say back what is the task that they are planning to do now. Miscommunication can happen since sometimes in our head, everything works perfectly. We are sure that the other understood what we wanted, but in reality, they just don't. If you're also working with people from all over the world, that means you sometimes face cultural differences, language barriers, or just simply a bad internet connection that one of the party had at one moment. Don't let it ruin things for you. Do whatever it takes to maintain excellent communication. I have another great example. Now, in our game, Detective Master, we gave this feedback: make the character sexy. Now, look at the outcome. How can we measure it? Is it what we meant? We clearly had something in mind. So we sent the team a reference to make the character look like a blonde Bond girl. Now, that means that we didn't just give the content, but we also added the visual. Then we jumped on a call and to talk with the team about the reference that we gave, and it made all the difference to ensure that we are 100% understood. It can save you time, energy, and disappointment. Now, see how beautiful our character turns out. Here's a bonus tip. As basic as it sounds, not everyone works with the same tools and systems. When giving feedback, always write the number of the version you reviewed and on which date. The developer can avoid fixing wrong versions, and it can easily track if needed. I really recommend also working on share presentation as your feedback tool to review version. You can respond, add screenshot, and a lot of people can work on it together at any given moment. The place where our review process begins at the earliest is our gaming accelerator, CrazyHubs. We have a hyper-casual game development accelerator in India, Turkey, Serbia, Israel, and South Africa. Our hubs include 4 months training program where we are teaching all the secrets of hyper-casual game success, from writing pitches, looking at trends, Unity technique, video editing, and much more. The review process starts as soon as they submit their application. It continues throughout the weekly show and tell meeting, in which we review the progress of the team from their first pitch and prototypes and on to later stages of game development. Our goal is to turn our hub members to self-sustained studios. Now, speaking of hubs, what do you see in the picture? I see success story. One of our latest hits released in October was Zoom Out 3D. And it was actually the result of the second round of our Tel Aviv hub in Israel. I'll share with you the story behind the game, and together we will see how our review process fits into it. When the studio Bandit Bears presented their first game idea, they started with the image of the lamb, and the reaction were very amusing. There were embarrassment, curiosity, and most importantly, interest arose. This is the first video they tested. So let's briefly go over our scorecard. Gameplay clarity. The call to action and the hand greatly contributed to the clarity of the ad. This type of game should put the player's curiosity at the center. The production value wasn't polished enough. The contrasts were there, but not enough, as well as the animation and the UI. Sorry. In terms of innovation, here we felt there was something that we didn't see recently. It felt like a combination between a brain game and a trivia with optical illusion and social trends. We gave them very high score here. In terms of engagement, there was a clear wow moment, the exposure of the first image. So we knew that this type of game needs super cool content. The first results were good, but not amazing. You can see that the first test failed on Facebook, and that could have been the end of the story. But since we are also running our test on TikTok, and things look completely different over there, the game showed potential, and they got green light to work on the day one version. From a team that had never done hypercasual before, they become a game development studio in one moment. We asked them to add strong content to the game, because in a game like this, you have to blow the player's mind in order to keep them playing. At this point, we had a dedicated product manager who worked with the team to make a new content. The team continued to work together with our product team and progress one step at a time to increase usage and reach the stage of testing the business feasibility of the game. We added the monetization layer and took the ROI test. In this test, we want to see if the average revenue per user is higher than the amount of money we're spending on it. I want to show you some of the feedback that the developers received, since we know it has greatly helped to improve the game. One of the basic things to look at is your level funnel and onboarding. This is the face of the game. This is the first impression. Our panel clearly showed that we are losing a lot of players already in the first level. And in Hyper as in Hyper, we don't want to make it too difficult for the players. It's highly recommend to start with a no-fail condition. And that's what we did. We eliminated the possibility of failing at the first level, and you can see the results in front of you. Another feedback was given, it was about the UI. The design looked a little bit amateur and a little bit outdated, the contrast, the button size, and we decided to put out the heavy guns. And our UI expert helped the team to improve all of their screens and make it much more up to date. As the game continued to progress and show feasibility to be launched, we decided to speed out the work on the version of the game. We gave the development team an office within our offices so we can give them up close and personal guidance. It was also a way for us to make sure that they always see their own buoy. Our marketing team started producing dozens of creative to be ready to the moment of launch. We started intensive icon tests. We tested so many icons, but we didn't stop until we reached the winning one. In addition, while Squid Game show was speaking, we also introduced creative who spoke the relevant language at the moment. Like the pic in the store, you can see the pic that this creative brought to our game. It's very important knowing how to respond on time to trend and create real-time marketing. So in this talk, I went over all of the key elements that we at CrazyLab use in order to create meaningful review and give valuable feedback that can move the needle. So when you and your team are in early stages of creating a pitch or a prototype, you can use our scorecard to evaluate your potential. When moving forward and working on your actual game, don't forget to raise your head and make sure you're still headed towards your buoy. And you need to focus on the business question, prioritize, keep it short and visual, and maintain open and collaborative communication with your team and your publisher. I have no doubt that this will steer you in the right direction toward your next hit. Thank you very much for listening. Now I can hear your questions.
Cool, that was great, and I love the fact that you guys are so committed to sort of bringing teams up to speed with you and kind of sharing that knowledge. I think that's a super important thing. It's kind of why I want to keep doing things like this as well. So there, I mean, I was going to go into questions myself, but we have audience questions, so I'm going to actually be a good boy for once and actually ask the audience questions. Have you had moments where you've had to start from scratch when designing the characters? And how do you resolve poor feedback efficiently?
Can you repeat the question? I didn't hear.
So the question was, have you ever had moments where you've had to start from scratch when designing characters? And how did you resolve the poor feedback effectively?
How to resolve the poor feedback? I'm not sure. What.
So I mean, so the way the question's been worded may be a little bit common. So as you were going through, you're talking about the particular game examples, and the art styles weren't quite what you wanted. And so, have you ever had a point where you've had to sort of just say, "No, that's rubbish. Forget that. Start from the beginning."
I understand I hope that I understand the question correctly. I have to say that in Hypercasual, since we are really encouraging our developers to start with simple, graphics and not to invest a lot of time and to even use, the asset store for that and to move speed ahead. I don't think that they really need to spend a lot of time, and while they can iterate and throw something if it wasn't good, make something new, it's not that much of of a disappointment for them because they really didn't invest a lot of effort creating it. I do understand, and it happened to me in the past that we worked on art for games for months and we had to throw it all away and begin from scratch. It's hard, but I always try to stick to the business questions, like I said. And if the data showed me that my my visual needs to be modified, then I just need to listen to that and start all over.
So one of the techniques we use is that we try to, for every game idea, we try to have 2 mechanic variations and 2 art variations. So basically that means 8 variations of gameplay trailer that we pull together at the beginning. And the reason we do that is that we could run those through and see exactly. But that means that we try to make sure that those art variations are dramatically different so that we can kind of get a really good sense of what the game could be.
I think that's very smart. And I try to do it with, especially in the internal production that we're doing. I really encourage to mix and match and to try 2 different stuff, different direction. Sometimes I use, I give the same idea to 2 teams with different briefs, see, which one turns out better, because I think it's worth the investment of the time and the effort of the team to work on it in parallel and then to check if which one was better.
No, exactly. And actually with one of these games, we worked out that 2 variations were both equally good.
I have the same problem. Let's call it this way.
Oh, right. Well, I've got the same game twice, and it feels different.
That I think that in Hypercasual, since it come and go so fast, I would say work on the 2 of them together simultaneously. Definitely.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. And the nice thing about that was, back to your point earlier about communication and how what proportion of that is about visual. The visual impact of that variation, whilst it was the same core underlying mechanic, it felt completely different.
Completely different, exactly. And I had one that uses drawing mechanic, while the other one was swerving, and it's the same theme, but it's completely different game. And hopefully both will release soon. So I think that it's a great way to do that.
Right, exactly. One last quickie, because we've only got a minute left. How important is engaging with pop culture for you? Is it essential to keep up with popular trends, or are there issues if you do that?
I'm not sure that I'm following. I'm trying to use
popular culture,
the inspiration that I can get,
Well, the fact that you got the Squid games into one of your games. Is that use of popular culture, so other media inside hyper-casual games, is that an important thing?
We're trying to take only inspiration from this, not to use, these specific, things. I think that everybody can take inspiration from anything and can turn it, sorry, to anything that the audience wants to play with.
Exactly, and I think this is one of the nice things about live management of games, is that we can pay attention to things and we can add seasonality. And even a hyper-casual game, game needs some attention to its sustaining element, even if it is only a relatively short-lived experience for the player. Moria, thank you so much for that. That was fantastic. I wish we had more time. Sadly, I have to move on. But the good news is I get to move on.
Thank you, Oscar. It was
pleasure
great
seeing you.
again.
Take care.